Based? So you may not have seen it, but Australia has actually passed legislation which bans anyone below 16 years old from using social media platforms. Now, there are some exemptions to this. 16 seems a little extreme, but I think that actually they haven't gone hard enough on this legislation personally, but I guess we'll take a look. Now, I was not born in Australia, but I did live there for like 10 years. I have an Australian passport. I put plenty of shrimps on the barbie, mate. And Australia is quite progressive compared to a lot of the world, but this I was not expecting. I thought that this was fake news. I thought that this banning 16s was completely fake news. I had to double check this. But gaming and messaging platforms are actually exempt from this, apparently. Although a lot of what might be happening and how it's being implemented isn't official as of yet, because it's only going to be implemented in November 2025, which gives like a whole year for companies to work out all the specifics about this. But as it says here, gaming and messaging platforms are exempt, as are sites that can be accessed without an account, meaning YouTube, so you're lucky, for instance, is likely to be spared. Although YouTube already has a YouTube Kids only section, and then it's got regular YouTube, which in my opinion regular YouTube should always be for someone like above 13, easily, and then YouTube Kids should be for anyone below. And if they popped that up to 16, honestly, I don't even think that would be the worst decision they've ever made. There are a lot of concerns that some people have regarding ID requirements, and also the fact that is this actually the best course of action for kids, because this could potentially isolate them. I think that being there myself as a kid back in the old age internet days, so we're talking like 2004-esque and a little bit beyond that years, it's more like, yeah, probably more like 2007 actually era. Things were quite different back then. We didn't have the likes of TikTok. We didn't have those really short form content things back then. And now social media is absolutely ingrained in like every part of people's lives. And there are a lot of problems that come with that. And even back when I was, on the old internet, as I'll keep referring to it, we ran into a lot of weird people even back then on Club Penguin, RuneScape, of all things. I can tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but as it says here, it says digital researchers have warned that there are no guarantees the unspecified technology which could rely on biometrics or identity information will work. So a big concern is on the age verification technology, because essentially we already have platforms like Discord, which are 13 plus, and Facebook, which is 13 plus. The problem is they don't really implement this very much. It's like if you go to the sexy sites online, it's basically like, are you over the age that you should be, yes or no? You mark yes, and then there you go, unfiltered access. And I guess they want to clamp down on that and add an extra step. So it is similar to some of what China is doing, which is a bad sign in a way. But I think that if it actually does help like children in general and people from getting addicted to social media and just yelling at each other and arguing and calling each other noobs from the age of like 13, maybe it's actually a good thing. And so there's a lot of different platforms that have been talking about this. You'll see that Sky News, BBC, I'm in England, so I'm mainly talking about the English news sites, but it's saying that social media platforms are liable for fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars if they don't systematically stop children younger than 16 from holding accounts. So it's just about being able to create and hold an account, so if they're not logged into anything, it doesn't apply to them. So I think that the companies could make some workarounds, just like YouTube technically does have. But as it states, it says it includes some of the toughest social media controls in the world and will force platforms to take reasonable steps to ensure age verification protections are in place. But at the same time, we do have countries like India, I believe, that banned TikTok, and we've got quite a few other countries that have banned specific social media sites. So this doesn't seem all that far-fetched, and my main issue is the fact that gaming and specific messaging apps are exempt, which one I get, but two, I think it should be included. I think gaming and things like that in general are not focused on enough. And gaming is getting a lot bigger in other countries like India, for instance, and those like mobile gaming places. And then just gaming as a whole with like Fortnite and everything, you know, it's a lot more popular than it ever was. So you will end up seeing younger folks on there. And then, of course, we've got Meta that said that it has a self-imposed minimum age of 13, and it wanted to empower young people to benefit from its platforms and provide parents with tools to support them instead of just cutting off access. And this, in theory, is wonderful because no one wants to have to ban social media or online platforms for anyone, right? But in theory, we let everyone do what they want. We let the parents parent. But the problem is not every parent does parent, or not every kid is in a very privileged position, or they're very, very poor in general, bad life circumstances, whatever it might be. And at the same time, you can imagine that parents in Australia, for instance, they had a tough cookie to crack, much like the rest of the world, in the fact that the kids want to be on social media, their friends are on social media. If they're not on social media, they're going to get bullied and ostracized. So what do you do about that? Well, if you can make it so that the government is to blame and not the parents, then the kids don't have any choice but to comply. And then it's not, oh, well, Timmy's mum said that he could use Facebook. Well, no, nobody's mum lets them use Facebook because the government doesn't allow it, because you'd need to use your ID to sign up to use the platform. So that does actually, I think it would fundamentally change the dynamic of how we handle social media, both as, you know, adults versus children as a whole. And even for young adults on social media, you know, around about that 16-year-old age range, especially if that would be their first time ever using a social media platform suddenly, and then they go to Twitter and then someone like tells them to like harm themselves, as Twitter users are known to do, that would be a very sudden like, whoa moment. But at least then it gives some years for the kids to be told why the ban's in place. It gives some years for the parents to like say, you know, let's ease you into this on a non-logged in account. This is what my account looks like. You'll be able to use this in 6 months' time or whatever. But this is one of the posts on Twitter, for instance, that I saw, where it says the House has passed the Online Safety Amendment Social Media Minimum Age Bill 2024. The bill will now be transmitted to the Senate. And people under this post were actually really negative about it. Absolutely disgraceful. Roland may not stand for re-election. It passed. Ugh. Labour, the party of fascists. So for some reason, particular posts get really, really hated on, whereas 77% of Australian adults that were surveyed wanted this. They said that they were in favour of it. And then both the main party and the opposition party of Australia voted in agreement for this. So I don't know, not every post you see on Twitter or social media is going to speak for the majority. Some will give you a more varied, you know, a more reasonable approach, but definitely because of the way that people are paid on Twitter now just to be vitriolic and cause issues, I really don't think that what you see on your own Twitter page or someone else's Twitter page is ever going to be, you know, it's never going to show you what the actual population believes. But as it states in the actual amendments of the Online Safety Act 2021 here, it talks about how an age-restricted user would be an Australian child who has not reached 16 years, and this entire document basically goes through how long they're planning to make it take, and what we should expect within the next sort of year to year and a half. So it talks about, for the purpose of this act, age-restricted social media platform means an electronic service that satisfies the following conditions. The sole purpose or a significant purpose of the service is to enable online social interaction between two or more end users. The service allows end users to link to or interact with some or all of the other end users. The service allows end users to post material on the service, and such other conditions, if any, are set out in the legislative rules, or an electronic service specified in the legislative rules but does not include a service mentioned in subsection 6. So, online business is not included. An age-restricted social media platform may be, but is not necessarily a social media service, and for specification by Class C, blah, 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 blah. So, it's very important to note that they've said here, it is of the service to enable online social interaction between two or more and allows them to post. That's the fundamental, I guess, focus on this legislation. And I guess it makes sense because one-on-one interactions, if you don't have many capabilities to do that, I think that probably younger folks can use that quite safely, especially if it's monitored by the parents, of course. And so basically they just don't want kids to have access to showing like content to 5 million people on TikTok suddenly and, you know, getting 5 million hate comments and then wanting to self-mutilate or something. So I don't really see much of an issue with this. The only possible issue would be government overreach in terms of ID requirements. But if you need to worry so much about what you're posting on social media that you cannot afford to have any form of ID or something similar, it might not necessarily be ID itself, but something similar to an ID to allow you access to the internet, if you're that worried about what you're posting on social media that you don't want to actually link to you, you probably shouldn't be posting on social media in the first place. And you're probably the reason why this is coming out so that children don't have to interact with you in the first place. Now, that being said, plenty of kids could have done all of this for themselves. Plenty of kids can think for themselves. Plenty of kids are smart. But also, kids are naive, kids are inexperienced, kids are young, and they are more than likely going to fall for things more than, say, you know, an older adult is. And that's where this comes from. And if you've been on the internet for more than 5 minutes, like I have, I've seen plenty of kids that get onto platforms that shouldn't, or people that appear to act like kids and they're like actually 45 years old. Sometimes it is difficult because you can get a 50-year-old that acts like an 11-year-old, and especially via text chat is very, very messy and murky. But I think overall, even though at that age, if I'd have been 15, I would have been so upset by a legislation like this, like, why? I can think for myself, I can do things for myself. I would have been upset, but now looking back on it, I understand the parents a lot more. And I think that's why 77% of Australians at the moment voted in favour of this, at least the ones that were surveyed. So, yeah, I think generally speaking, it is the go-to option, at least for Australia. It might not be the same in America or overseas in a different country. In the UK, they might not like it just because they already have problems with the government at the moment. But I think that there needs to be more of a focus on social media and gaming platforms in general. Not just social media, but mainly the chatting side of games, the toxic side of games. I mean, if any of these politicians had ever seen a League of Legends chat or an old Call of Duty lobby, like, they would lose their top. Like, I remember the old COD lobbies. Yeah, I remember them. But we got through it. But did we know at the time just how bad it was, really? And did that probably influence a lot of what we are now? Probably it did. We probably didn't need to be shown it quite so early. And now we have the issue that kids are seeing all of these like beautied up influencers or whatever. They're shown very specific, targeted, paid for content all the time with fake lives and fake beliefs, and they're seeing people like bully each other on TikTok for like random arbitrary traits of like, I don't know, they've got a triangular shaped shoulder or something. It's ridiculous on TikTok. I don't even use TikTok. If I don't use TikTok, you don't need to use TikTok. I'm just saying. You don't need TikTok. You don't even need YouTube. YouTube is helpful for some guide stuff, but you absolutely don't need them. You can find the information on Google or just elsewhere. But yeah, just to give my quick, I guess, 10 cents into this, because the reason why I think that more of a focus needs to happen in terms of gaming and social media in general, I can actually tell you a story about RuneScape. Because Varrock, or Varrock, however people normally say it, I remember Varrock. That was where I married multiple RuneScape men. I basically hoard out on RuneScape for free items, is what I used to do when I was like, what, 12 or something. That was a lot of fun. But it also meant that, probably because I was talking to far too many people at too young an age, I met some very weird people. I met people in RuneScape that were literally asking me to meet up with them in forests. And I was like, no. But one of them, I agreed to it and then never turned up. And then the next day they logged in and they were like, I went to the forest and you didn't turn up. Why did you do that? Why did you lie to me? And I was like, wait, dude, you were serious about me meeting up in that forest near your house? That is weird. Who knows what would have happened that day? And then I had another guy where I was like, I used to play with him every day and he told me he was 14. And then one day he messages me and he's like, oh, I have something to tell you. I hope it doesn't change anything between us, Agu. And I was like, okay, this is getting weird already. And then he messages me, well, I'm actually 37, not 14. I hope this doesn't change anything. And I was like, okay, dude. You know, Pepe looking around. But I was kind of whatever about it. And then immediately the guy starts getting weird, asking weird questions like, what color are your undergarments sort of questions. You know, those sorts of questions. And it just kept devolving until the point where he invited me to a platform called Chatango. I actually had quite a few RuneScape people say, oh, come and chat to me on Chatango. And Chatango was like a chatting website group that was basically, it felt completely unmoderated and you could set up private chats in there as well. And I got asked many questions from probably people that were specifically targeting younger folks on that platform. But Chatango, it doesn't bring back good memories, let's put it that way. But that was a lot of times, a lot of experiences on the old internet, and it does still happen to this day. But now that we have a lot of parental controls, like games like Roblox have actually been implementing things like that quite well now. Like if you set up the parental controls properly, you can limit screen time, you can limit chats in a lot of games now. And I think parents have to be on it, because if they are going to let their kids on online multiplayer gaming websites, they have to be aware of what's going on. But specifically for social media as well, obviously you've got like the twerking girls on TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. And like you see the kids replicating it, and like they're seeing the Nickies and the Cardi B's that occasionally come up on their feed, and they get the music playing. And you know, kids might sometimes listen to questionable music with questionable lyrics, but you don't want to see your kid there twerking for a video to put on their TikTok for many reasons. So I think personally that this is a good step, and that's just someone that does have a lot of their own online platforms. I've been doing this for years. I think it's better if the kids aren't allowed on those platforms as early as they currently are, and making it government legislated rather than just hoping that the parents do a good enough job. I don't think they do. Not all of them. Some of them are absolutely fantastic about it, but you know, all it takes is one or two parents that do a horrific job, and then suddenly little Timmy's in school showing you prawn stuff, and you don't want to see that. Well, some of them might, but we don't want that. So if they can do that for those websites on top of regular social media websites, that's something that is missing from this legislation. But there have been a lot of people questioning things as well, in terms of people that have done the research into, you know, childhood depression, impacts of social media on the children's brains, and there's a lot of disagreements about what people believe. Like, some of the studies have said, oh, we can't actually tell you that social media is safe for kids, and then you'll see other studies that say, oh, actually it helps kids that feel isolated. But at the end of the day, if the kids were looked after properly, we wouldn't need any of this stuff to worry about. But if a kid is already depressed, it's not really going to matter what's happening on social media. But if a kid gets targeted specifically on social media because maybe they say something dumb because they're a kid, or I don't know, just because they get targeted at school, they might not be well equipped enough to handle that at a young age. But as it says here, academics, politicians and advocacy groups have warned that the ban, as envisioned by the government, could backfire, driving teens to the dark web or making them feel more isolated. There are questions about how it will work in practice. Many worry that the process has been too rushed and that if users are asked to prove their age, it could lead to social media companies being handed valuable personal data. And yes, they could be given valuable personal data. That is true, but it does go through in the bill that they can only use the data if it pertains to the user's age. So it can only be used if the user, or if they need to use it to prove or disprove a user's age. They're not allowed to store the data for any other reason. That's already written in all that big legislative form. But saying that kids might be forced onto the dark web and make them feel more isolated, again, maybe if less kids were on social media at such a young age in general, it would force more community events to be happening and there'd be more awareness of some of the dangers. Whereas now you tell a kid, you know, TikTok's dangerous, and they'll be like, okay, mum. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care. But if it's government-backed, the kids will have a harder time arguing against it, because then it's not just a silly, annoying mother or father saying it, it is the government telling them that. But I don't know. It is a difficult one, definitely, and it has the potential to go very wrong. A lot of people think that Labour won't do a good job of implementing it and it'll probably all implode anyway. I like to think that it will go well. And just like the bans of TikTok in other countries, I don't see why it can't work for Australia. I think it's a really good step forward if they look to implement this and it goes okay at least. Well, why can't we do that in the other European or Western countries? Because considering how other countries already ban certain social media sites, yet the West is so open with their use of social media, it's actually kind of wild, because other countries talk about how the West is like overly progressive and yet too restrictive sometimes, and yet they're the ones that just let the kids unfiltered everywhere. So yeah, I don't know, but definitely interesting. As someone that's been on the internet for so long, and you know, I speak to quite a few people every day on online social media platforms, I'm 100% in support of making it so that people have to be at least 16 to chat on those platforms. Even to just view YouTube videos or anything, 100% I am in support of that. It does mean that they'd have to find another way to find certain information if it came to that. And I think that would almost, you know, promote other kinds of social media sites that maybe aren't actually social media, they're in a different format. So it could change a lot of things about how people view the internet and their use of the internet, at least until they're 16, that is. But, you know, those are formative years, and I do think that more needs to be done to actually verify user ages, because I've had in my DMs 8-year-olds before, and like, I just have to stop talking to them and report them and hope that they get banned, because I don't want to be talking to 8-year-olds in my DMs. It doesn't happen very often, very rare, because my audience is generally like at least over 20. But the times that it has happened, I'm like, where's your mum, bro? Like, where's mother, dearest? But anyway, It's definitely an interesting one, and one little leaving note here is that it said one of the authors of a UK study of 17,400 young people cited by the government in support of the ban said that the Australian government had misunderstood the purpose and findings of the research, and the voices of children and young people have been conspicuously missing for most of the debate and commentary. So he said that's explaining why he changed his mind from supporting the ban to disagreeing with it, and the government is running blindfolded into a brick wall. Complex issues like this require careful consultation and consideration, not shortcuts. Which is correct, but in my opinion, this should have happened 10 years ago. So how many more years are we going to keep going, oh, we need to think about this, we need to really think about this and get it right? I'd rather them half screw it up and then fix it, rather than just let TikTok run rampage on people's brains at far too young an age. It's the dopamine, the rush that people get from the constant hours of scrolling on these platforms. You know, everything's got a shorts format now. I hate shorts format. That's why I don't use TikTok. It's why I don't really use shorts on YouTube either. But those things in particular are quite bad, and I've known plenty of way too young kids posting stuff on there on the shorts format, and it's difficult for social media companies to even sift through and get rid of all that content. So if there's a way to make it even easier for the social media companies to actually focus on, you know, actual abusive messages, dealing with proper problems that are happening on the platform, that would be an overall win. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of people getting very angry about this, about the potential for IDs being implemented, and that side I do understand, but I think overall it would be a good thing for the children, and just in general, we should have spots on the internet that should primarily be for adults, or at least young adults, into adults, and we should have spaces for the younger folks to keep to themselves. Then they can do the transition period at some point, whether that's 16 or 15, whatever ends up coming to fruition. But I'm definitely interested to see how this works out. Definitely. But I guess that was our little look into this for now. Let me know what you think. I would have been upset at the time, but I think it would have been overall a good thing to limit this and just focus more on playing games rather than crap posting online, personally. And plus, if they end up on Twitter or places like that, the kids just shouldn't be there in the first place, in my opinion. But yeah, a lot of thoughts on this from many different sites, but you can check all of the things that they've suggested and they want implemented in the little file, the PDF file. But yeah, interesting times for sure.